And the next in the line is Dr. Sailesh Kothalkar, MBBS MS consultant, ENT, head and neck surgeon. Sir, I welcome you from Faculty of Pharmacy, DIT University over here. So, to introduce Dr. Sailesh Kothalkar, he is a accomplished and acclaimed done from the medical fraternity. Dr. Sailesh Kothalkar is today a well-acclaimed consultant ENT surgeon par excellence. Dr. Kothalkar has, with his acquired knowledge on the subject of his choice, filled up the void in the ENT segment of in the medicine in central India to a great deal with a precision. Dr. Kothalkar has a distinction of performing the highest level and numbers of endoscopic work in central India. He has performed more than 3,000 head and neck surgical procedure till date. Dr. Kothalkar has the distinction of having performed the highest number of tracheal resections and anastomosis in central India. He has time and again performed live surgical demonstration in endoscopic surgery, micro ear surgery, head and neck cancer surgery. He is a fellow observer in Tata Memorial Cancer Hospital, fellow observer at KEM Hospital in Mumbai, at Sion Hospital, Mumbai. He has the distinction of working as a lecturer at Grant Medical College and JJ Group of Hospitals. Has fellowship under world famous facial plastic surgeon, fellowship in robotic cancer surgery, South Korea. Thank you, sir, for accepting the invitation for this event and deliberating your talk, sir. Over to you, sir. Namaskar.
Thank you, madam, for the nice words. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll start my presentation because I have left my surgery in between. I have come for the webinar. Please correct my questions because I'll be, after finishing my talk, I'll take up the question, then I have to rush to my OR.
Yes, sir. Fine.
Over to my presentation. Now, since we all know that ever since the second COVID wave has started, we have come across a more dreaded problem of the fungal infection, what we call mucormycosis. Now, mucormycosis is an acute and rapidly advancing, serious, potentially deathful fungal infection that's infrequently diagnosed. Before this COVID second wave, we used to see hardly a couple of patients in a year. In my career, I must have operated around 12 or 13 patients in the last 25 years. But in these last 4 months, I have done more than 170 surgeries for this. So mucormycosis is happening in the second wave after the second wave of COVID. And this post-COVID, this is one of the commonest diagnoses of the rhinocerebroorbital mucormycosis. The major routes of infection is via inhalation of conidia. Conidia is the spore of the fungus which is omnipresent. Normally it's present over the dead woods, vegetables, rotten fruits, everywhere it is. So we all inhale the same air, and as we have the good immunity, we don't succumb to these infections. So the other routes includes the ingestion and the traumatic inoculation. The types of mucormycosis are rhinocerebral, which is the most commonest one during these days. Pulmonary mucormycosis is second commonest. Cutaneous, gastrointestinal and disseminated mucormycosis are lowest in the orders. We see those patients very rarely. So what are the predisposing factors for COVID-19? So to make you all aware that COVID-19 itself, and especially this beta strain this time which we are getting affected with, is the one which is causing severe immunocompression or immunosuppression. The contributing factors for developing these fungal infections are uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, That is, it's a stage what we call a diabetic ketoacidosis, because you must be aware that all these patients are receiving steroids in order to prevent them from the pulmonary involvement. And also in the second week of the COVID infection, when patient gets a cytokine storm, this cytokine storm is suppressed by the corticosteroids. So corticosteroids are another immunosuppressants. The third commonest cause with what we are finding in these infections are the neutropenia, the increased IL-6 and ferritin level. Now, why this ferritin? Because ferritin is usually not available extracellularly, it's available in the intracellular compartments. And this fungus is a iron loving fungus. It attacks the blood vessels and it causes the angio invasion, meaning thereby it invades the blood vessel, and because of that the area supplied by that particular blood vessel gets necrosis, it undergoes decay. So another predisposing factors we found that it's a lymphopenia and the reduced CD4 and CD8 in markers, the inflammatory cytokine surge, and during this inflammatory cytokine surge we get this IL-6 and levels higher, and we consider that these are the two factors which are more responsible for more irrational use of the steroids. This fungus especially causes the endotheliolithiasis, means the inflammation of the endothelium of the blood vessels, and that is how it invades the blood vessel. It causes the thrombotic state by direct invasion of the endothelial cells, and thereby it causes diffuse endothelial inflammation, and subsequently there is a scarring and the invasion of the blood vessels which supplies to that particular organ. Another predisposing factors what we have come across is the malnutrition, metabolism, and those who were not diabetics, they are getting a diabetogenic tendencies and hence they are becoming a diabetics. Now full-blown diabetes is seen in 40% of our patients, and those who were not diabetic at all. So what diabetes causes? Diabetic impairs neutrophilic function. Now, as we all know that neutrophils are involved in the phagocytosis, what we call a chemotaxis. It also is responsible for the transmembrane migration and reduced superoxide production. Diabetes reduces binding of transferrin to the iron in the acidotic environment. As I have said that the iron is not freely available. Iron is always bind to the transferrin enzyme. But since diabetes reduces this binding capacity, iron becomes more freely available, which is sort of food for the mucor. The increased GRP78 mediates the invasion and it damages the human endothelial cells by Rhizopus oryza. It also inhibits the platelets through structural and functional modification of the platelet membrane properties and alteration of the nitric oxide metabolism. So high risk factors which are there in COVID-19 for mucor are lymphopenia, high dose and early initiation of the steroids, high level of IL-6 and serum ferritin, tocilizumab. This is also a monoclonal antibody which was used, tried. Also the plasma therapy. These two are also added to the list which causes severe immunosuppression, neutropenia, uncontrolled diabetes and the diabetic ketoacidotic status, prolonged use of broad spectrum antibiotics. Now, what are the symptoms that how these patients present to us? Patient always complains of the facial swelling or pain, headaches, nasal or sinus congestion, nasal bleeding, blackish nasal discharge, black lesions over the nasal bridge or the upper side of the mouth, and that becomes quickly more severe. So it spreads very fast. Fever and foul smell and difficult and painful mouth opening. If at all this fungus has invaded the infratemporal fossa and the pterygoid muscles. Now, what are the commonest signs? We see the periorbital edema, ptosis, proptosis, lid edema, chemosis, ophthalmoplegia, extensive nasal crusting, palatal ulcers, facial nerve palsies, diminution of vision, loss of vision or non-reactive and fixed pupils, hemiplegia, altered mental sensations, and the earache. So this is how the fungal crustaceans looks like. It's a tissue necrosis because of angioinvasion and thrombotic Ishar. Diagnosis is presumptive and is based on the patient's history, physical examination, and the patient's risk factors. A definitive diagnosis is difficult. There are no serological or blood tests that are helpful. So how can we diagnose these patients? So these patients are diagnosed by the means of the nasal endoscopy. In endoscopy, we find this blackish Ishar which you are seeing. There is a complete necrosis of the lateral nasal wall and the turbinates. The commonest site of involvement is the middle turbinate, then the maxillary ostium, then maxillary sinus. In this, the septum is involved, the palate also can get involved, and turbinates are the one which looks like the first level of entry. So as this nose is the portal of entry for the nasal, for the sporangia, and wherever this sporangia they harbor, they start producing the hyphae. And next, sir. So here you can see the diagnostic modalities. KOH mount is the one basic investigation, but this is only 18 to 20% of sensitive in detecting the mucor. Fungal culture is a good technique, but it takes around 5 to 6 days of a time for the culture. And the commonest and the best diagnosis for this is by the frozen section, that is the kind of a histology, or the normal histopathology. If we have the facilities available for the frozen section, then within hours we can come to know that this is a fungus or not. And another form of it is the routine histopathology. The report of this comes after 5 to 6 days, where we can confirm the diagnosis. Another diagnostic tool is the fluorescence by calcofluor and the blancofluor. Calcofluor has a sensitivity of around 74%, and the blancofluor, it's claimed that it's sensitive up to 90%. So radiological investigations. Now we have a choice of doing the CT and the MRI. But over the period, it has been proved that CT is not of a much helpful diagnostic tool as far as the fungus is concerned. The best diagnostic tool for mucormycosis is the contrast enhanced MRI, where we can see the live tissue and the dead tissue. So preoperatively only it can guide us whether how much tissue is involved, and looking at the MRI diffusion scans, we can decide about our extent of the surgery. Mainstay of treatment is the antifungal medication. Repeated and aggressive and radical surgical debridements, and the treatment of underlying cause. So the simple mechanism of this action of the antifungal medication, it starts when we remove the dead part till we get a normal bleeding tissue all around. And the fallacy is, if we have a bleeding tissue around, then only whichever antifungals which we are giving intravenously, they will reach at the site where the fungus has caused the damage, and there the action of the antifungal starts very rapidly. Treatment of underlying cause, as I have said, that the diabetes is found to be the main offending disease. So we have to keep the glycemic indices of all the patients under control. It has to be monitored very strictly. Treatments need to be fast and aggressive, because by the time even the presumptive diagnosis is made, often the patient has suffered a significant tissue damage that cannot be reversed. All patients require both surgical and the medical management. To medication, we have two main goals: antifungal medications to slow or halt the fungal spread, and the commonest and the best drug for this is the amphotericin B. Initially intravenous is the usual drug of choice for antifungal treatment. In addition, we have posaconazole or isavuconazole to treat the mucormycosis. Now, what is the role of surgery? The aim of surgery is to remove the devitalized tissue, debulking of the infective tissue, allowing for the faster action of the antifungals, and to establish the histopathology, that is the main diagnostic tool for the fungal infection. The blood vessels thrombosis with the necrosis results in the poor penetration of the antifungal agent to the site of the infection, and that is the aim of the surgery, to remove all the dead, decayed material till the normal tissue, bleeding tissue we encounter. To reduce all the dead and necrotic tissue till normal healthy tissue is encountered is what is the goal of the surgical management. Now, there are different types of operation. Only functional endoscopic surgery, but most of the times this becomes insufficient. So it's a part of the surgery, or it's one of the surgery. Along with that, we have to combine it with the modified Denker's, dacrocystorhinostomy, septectomy, because as I have said, the commonest things, organs which are involved are the turbinates, then the septum, the floor of mouth, that is the floor of nasal cavity, the palate, and according to the involvement, we have to modify our surgeries. So once there is an involvement of the orbit, we have to do the orbital decompression. Always we have to look for the spread into the infratemporal fossa and the pterygopalatine fossa, and it needs the exploration and the clearance if the fungus is present there. Enucleation versus exenteration of the eyeball. We have been doing intraconal, intraorbital endoscopic debridement. See, the disease spreads from the lateral nasal wall, then the lateral wall of the orbit is lamina papyracea, and inferiorly it's an infraorbital wall, and below the infraorbital wall we have the maxillary sinus. So as the disease spreads from medial to lateral, and if the lamina papyracea and the infraorbital wall are involved, then and we see the orbital periosteum very dusky, then we have to open up the orbital periosteum and remove the fat and the contents of the intraorbital this thing until it starts bleeding. So removing the eyeball is not the purpose of this. The purpose is to remove the dead and the decayed material in and around the eyeball. We've been doing this with endoscopy, and so far in our 175 patients, we have only did exenteration of the eyeballs in only 2 patients. The rest, all the patients, we have saved the structures of the eyeball, and though there was no vision when they presented to us. So hard palate, if it is involved, then you have to do the palatectomy. Anterior skull base extension, this becomes a bit lengthier surgeries. If you get the intracranial extension of the fungus, then you have to clear up the disease. You have to remove the involved brain tissue and then close the defects with the fat fascia lata and the pericranial flaps. So this is how is the surgery being done. On the right side, left side of the skin, you see the septum. This is the middle turbinate which is being removed. This is the dead tissue which needs to be removed till we start the normal tissue and the bleeding tissue. The purpose of this surgery is to remove all the dead and decayed tissue till we encounter the normal tissue. But since we don't see the fungal filaments in the normal tissue, the surgery needs to be extended little further, 1 or 2 steps, so that we completely eradicate the disease in one single go. The purpose of this is to avoid multiple surgeries, as this particular disease is known for its recurrent debridements. But if you do it a bit radical way, you reduce the numbers of repeated surgeries. And this is the bony septum which is being removed. This is again the dead tissue from the maxillary antrum. This is the sphenoid, the end-on sinus which you are seeing is the sphenoid sinus. You can see the devitalized mucosa, and that is the rostrum of the sphenoid, that is the anterior wall. You see that black bone pieces which are being removed, and the sinus, the base of the skull looks healthy. So there, the things which are being picked up is the rostrum and the posterior ethmoidal cells. Rostrum needs to be drilled out or gouged out because you cannot afford to leave there. This is the optic nerve where my suction is touching, and this is the upper boundary of the maxillary antrum. So in this patient, the orbit is being explored. As I have said, that the lamina papyracea, that orbital wall which separates the orbit from the nasal cavity, this needs to be removed. You can see the healthy periosteum. So we did not enter in the eyeball, but if at all there is an involvement, we can do this debridement in the intraconal compartment with this sophisticated instrumentation. Now this is the frontal sinus. The mucosa and the sinus looks to be healthy. This is infraorbital wall which is being removed, and that is the orbit where I'm touching. You can see the clivus, where now the last portion of this surgery would be the exploration of the cavities. Now, how do we do the post-op management? As I have said, that we have to give these patients the antifungals. Antifungals are given according to the involvement of the sinuses. If the disease is going beyond the sinuses, then we have to treat these patients with minimum 14 days of amphotericin. If the disease is only limited to the sinuses, we have to give them antifungals for 7 minimum days. Post-operatively, this patient needs the alkaline nasal douches, which are usually started from the day 4. Alternate nasal endoscopy and suction clearance is done. If the patient is admitted in the hospital, we prefer to do it on alternate day. The purpose of this is to suck out all blood clots, the debris, and to inspect the cavity, what we call the surveillance of the cavity. So this is how the cavity looks after 1 month, after 2 months, and then the complete mucosalization is the kind of guide to stop the medication. And medication follow, we usually give the posaconazole or the isavuconazole. So to conclude, the incidence of rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis is likely to rise both as a co-infection and as a sequelae of the COVID-19. Early diagnosis and management with aggressive antifungals and the surgical debridement can improve the cervical. The complications can be the cavernous sinus involvement, multiple cranial palsies, blindness, meningitis, brain abscess, carotid artery or jugular vein thrombosis causing hemiparesis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this nice presentation and how this mucormycosis is affecting and the treatment. Sir, there are a few questions which I would like to take on behalf of the participants. There is a question that why this mucormycosis case is only seen and why not like other fungal infections with candidiasis and aspergillus and other cases are not so much reported.
See, mucor is the invasive fungus, and for the invasion, what are the predisposing factors is the post-COVID status. As I've said, that this variant of the COVID this time in the second wave is found to be very severely causing immunosuppression. Secondly, steroid is the mainstay of the treatment, because as we all know that the only steroids are treating the patient and not the remdesivir, tocilizumab and the plasma therapy. Nothing has been proven so far. So only steroids, that is the inflammatory phase, has to be reduced by the use of the steroids. So if patients have the diabetes, their sugar levels, they rise to the ketostic levels, and they are the patients who become more prone for getting this fungus, because the only thing which is the only condition which is required for this mucormycosis is the severe immunosuppression. So COVID-19 itself, this strain is a causing the severe immunosuppression. That is number one. Number two, it is getting worse by the administration of the steroids. And number three, this particular variant of the COVID is also affecting the beta cells of the pancreas, and this is causing diabetes in the non-diabetic persons. So out of our all patient series, we have 40% of patients who were not diabetics before, but because of this COVID-19 strain, because of their injuries to their pancreas, and because of their disturbed metabolism of the insulin, they have become the diabetics. And we are following this patient since last 5 months, but we are not finding any anti-diabetic drugs going down. In fact, we have to escalate the doses at times. So what we feel that this is not a transient phenomena. We are adding around 40% of diabetic population, those who have suffered from this COVID mutant. And why Mucor? As I've said, this is the severely immunosuppressive condition made worse by the administration of steroids and made again worse by not controlling or monitoring their sugars.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, there is another question, like what are the non-medical and non-surgical alternatives to minimize post-surgical complications out of these conditions?
See, the treatment of this particular disease is surgery and the medication. There is no third option available for this. There is nothing like we can get rid of this condition by any medication or any other sort of other therapies. If you have a mucormycosis, you have the only option of getting yourself operated and taking a proper, sufficient antifungal medication along with the treatment of the comorbid conditions. Full stop. There is no other alternative treatment to this.
Okay, sir. So, last question from my side, sir. Like this variant, this mucormycosis condition is not seen in the first wave of COVID, and as predicted, that third wave will be there also, and it has been seen in the second wave. So, is there chances that this can be seen in the third wave with other variant also?
See, this is a prediction because nobody predicted after the first wave that this second mutant is going to be this lethal. But this has caused the damage. And third wave, we don't know that which mutant will be causing this third wave and what would be his presentation. So at present, it's difficult and hard to comment that what third wave is going to give us the surprises. So we have to take the things as it comes. We got this second mutant, it gave us COVID and the severe immunosuppression, and the result of that was the mucor in many of the patients. This we are treating at our level best, but we cannot assume or we cannot comment on the third wave and how much would be the devastating effects. That nowhere we don't have any data about this.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for giving your valuable time, and you're having time for your surgery also. You're busy so much, so I will very much thankful from DIT University as well as from IPA Delhi branch that you have given your precious time to us and you have given this talk. So let me now, can I call my head of the department, Dr. Thavagre Chitme sir, to just give a last words from vote of thanks from his side.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir. So you have enlightened us with a lot of knowledge and you shared your experience-based knowledge. That is an excellent one, sir. So we are highly indebted for your talk on this session. And I'm sure so all of our faculty members and the students got benefit out of it. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.